either the prior action where Wells Fargo was the plaintiff, nor the current action.
I'm getting the representation in the current action.
But you're not, you haven't as of yet.
Right, it's correct.
And you never did in the first.
Mr. Newton, I had $20,000 in an account, and I went to get a lawyer, and you took the money out of my account on a garnishment.
Is that a no?
That's a no, and I asked the federal judge for an attorney, and he kind of laughed at me. You have to know Judge Hogan to appreciate that one.
And then in paragraph 11, your employment being terminated and your reputation being destroyed, that's the unanticipated substantial change you're relying on. Is that correct?
That's the primary. There's a lot more. I mean, if you want to put it in a summary way, and parts of it, yeah.
Paragraph 12 says my monthly income currently is zero.
That is correct. Essentially, I mean, the $20. This was a little bit of interest income that wasn't. You know what I'm saying? I mean, Mr. Hoppala was noting that there might be a few thousand now of interest income.
And you received $2,000. Please received a little over $7,000 in dividends from the Clark.
No, that was in 2012.
That's, I think, what it said.
Right.
All right.
And that's what the basis of this 800 part of it, is that there is some money out there. I'm sure.
What I want to inquire of you right now is about what assets you had coming out of the dissolution of marriage.
Okay.
And so just tell us, just a brief, just name.
What I left with was a Sears Road property. One of them, there was 2 property parcels, two separately encumberable, sellable tax parcels.
You got the larger one.
Larger one with the home. And then I had the 401k that I had ended up liquidating last year.
The employer stock option plan.
Yeah, but you remember what happened to Fannie Mae? It imploded, so it became
I
worthless.
believe you testified before that it had negligible value.
It's zero now. It imploded. Once the government took it over, one fine day, implosion. 100,000 to zero overnight.
And any other assets that you had at the time?
No, not even barely, not even household effects, as you remember from the long lists.
You ultimately sold the Sears Road property.
That is correct.
And you sold it for $699,000.
Excellent price.
A little more than you thought.
I thought I'd get more. Actually, it turned out, as you know, that when she sold the other parcel, that was what I figured the thing was worth right there. It's because of the other tax law.
Then that was gross. So were there taxes?
Oh, realtor fees. I think I'd given you complete documentation on the past.
Just like some kind of ballpark figure.
Yeah, basically, I ended up with about $400,000 out of the deal. I ended up with $400,000 in my pocket out of the deal. I invested it with a guy named. He'll come back to me. He's going to jail for fraud, as it turns out. Scott McKee, that's it, James Scott McKee. Right. Well, once I started sensing improper and irregularities in what he was doing with my money, he didn't lose hardly any of my money, but I pulled it all out because early on I sensed there was irregularities in his operation. I tend to sense irregularities in operations early on.
You do, don't you?
You tend to sense it, and that's what happened at Wells Fargo, where you guys had this problem I have to report to you guys. And it's real because I'm real smart. I know what I'm doing. I know my business.
And you feel really compelled to act out on your perception about your
well, it's sequential, meaning at that time you don't do much of anything, but once they start sticking their attorneys on you, then each day everybody ups the ante, and there you are, It's a strange game that these civil attorneys play. No offense, man.
Those are the assets, your assets at the time of the dissolution of marriage.
That's correct.
And you were employed, and it was stated in the marital settlement agreement that your current income was $180,000.
Roughly, yes.
Okay. You had, in fact, made a lot more than that a couple of years.
There's a couple of years, yeah. So what we did was averaging, I think.
Yeah, right. And like 1 year you made $312,000.
Oh, it was amazing. 1 year, it was great.
Another year you made $273,000.
That's correct. Those were a couple good years.
But we used to, as you say, averaging a baseline was $180,000.
Yeah, but the thing important, as you know, is it dropped off immediately due to the fact of the market. I mean, it wasn't me, it wasn't Andy. It was in the news everywhere. Everybody kind of knows it, I think.
You're referring to the recession.
To the collapse of the housing market. But what most of the general public doesn't really comprehend is what the specific Dodd. You think Dodd-Frank, you think of a big federal law. When you're a mortgage loan officer, it's on your good faith, a little form, and it affects how you do your numbers. It affects the actual dollars and cents.
Now,
it's very specific.
In my trial memo, I quoted, basically I quoted your federal court filing.
And sometimes those were emotional. You have to look at what they put into court against me and see that I just responded in their own ridiculous kind against them. They're civil attorneys, corporations.
Let me correct you there. I'm referring now to the allegations of your complaint that was filed in September.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. And in that district court complaint, are the allegations in your
yes.
complaint?
What it is that there's
this.
Yes, I based my complaint on a similar case against them in Maricopa County, Arizona.
Okay, but the question is, are the factual allegations
Yes,
about
the
you
factual allegations.
correct?
Well, again, I'm not an attorney. I did the best job as a pro se I could
To state
to simply
facts.
tell the facts. Okay, I alleged racketeering with the underlying crime of kidnapping because of the use of corrupted police.
I'm just asking about just facts, not
Got it.
law
Thank you.
theories. So the factual allegations you made, is to the best of your knowledge, are true.
They're absolutely true and documentable with paper that's external to myself, that I don't pull off of conspiracy.com, that's derived from being working there and collecting it,
Okay.
getting it to the FBI.
And
It's complex.
All right. So you talk about having 30 years in the industry as a mortgage originator, 13 with Fannie Mae.
Well, 13 is Fannie Mae, but 17 or so is mortgage originator.
Okay. And the last two were Wells Fargo Home Mortgage.
Correct.
And here's a sentence. Petitioner earned $200,000, mostly in commissions, in his last full year of employment at Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, consistent with his earnings over the prior 10 years.
That's correct, but it was, as I mentioned to you, last hearing a fluke because they had offered a special program that allowed us to do these refinances that required no work and we could make quick money. All that money was made in approximately 6 months of that year, and then they pulled the program. And that explains why the next year, 2011, by the middle of the year, I had made, like $40,000. It's because the program just wasn't there. It was a one-time opportunity.
The number was a little higher, but it was for less than half a year. It was only
Right, I understand that. But what I'm saying is it wasn't anywhere near the $200,000. It's because of that program, and it was all done in a 6-month period.
In fact,
The program was taken away, and that
once you started making your complaints about Wells Fargo to First the Manager and others,
Right.
then didn't that take up some of your time?
No, not really. What happened was they put my loans in for special underwriting, so they would have a much higher decline rate. What they're trying to do is starve you out of there. Because if you don't have commissions for a couple months, they just fire you. In Oregon, they don't even fire you anyway, so it kind of was a mystery to me what they were up to, except for legal fees.
Now, in terms of, just getting right to the point here,
Thank you.
in terms of your assets, and you explained what your assets were at the time of dissolution of marriage, you have current assets that you've described today, correct? And those include 25% of Clark LLC.
That's not an asset that I recognize. I'm sorry.
understand that
You don't. If you can't access it, control it, sell it, spend it, take money from it,
Well, let me ask
it's
you
an intangible asset. It's what's called an intellectual product.
Okay. Let me ask you this. You testified that between 2008 and 2013, basically a 5-year period, that you borrowed about $107,000, and your parents didn't have to worry about that because if you didn't repay it, then it would just come out of your share. So isn't that you using money?
No.
That is not.
No, because it was their discretion personally whether to lend it or not. It had nothing to do with the corporation. It's personal. Then they take their money and put it into the corporate account and pay it if they want.
In our request for discovery, we asked for any documents that would explain the status of your holdings.
We gave that to you, Mr. Newton.
Now,
We
what
gave
did
you,
you give me that
we gave you a
explains-
notarized statement that was filed by my parents in the court. By my parents, my elderly parents.
Not in these proceedings.
Yes, it was, Mr. Newton. Back in August of 2012, I filed with the court a affidavit they went and had notarized stating that I have no control over that and that there's no cash value to it to me and that they don't have to lend to me. Okay, it was very succinct and very clear. They don't want any part of this, and that's why my mother wants to undo this whole thing. Okay, that's what they're going to do. They're just not happy with how this is. They didn't intend it for it to be used this way.
I'm going to
So it's not an asset. It's an intellectual product.
mark it one.
If you can sell it or loan against it, that's
So, Mr. Clark,
yes, sir.
I understood your testimony from Mr. Hopla about the LLC. And so I know what your side's position is. Why don't you just go ahead and answer Mr. Newton's
Okay.
questions, and then Mr. Hopla will get a chance to follow up with you
Got
and
it.
clarify.
Thank you.
I'm going to show you a letter dated February 24, 2012. I've marked it 101. It appears to be signed by your father. And I'll ask you to read paragraph 2.
As described above, Andrew G. Clark now owns 25% of the Clark Properties LLC assets with no limitations. But that's not actually correct, as they followed up. That's taken out of context. That's why they went and did a special notarized memorandum to clarify this isn't theirs.
Let me ask you another
They don't control it. It's just a share of a corporation. If you were a stockholder of a corporation, you can't sell the
Mr.
corporation.
Newton, ask his next question.
Sorry. I can't. It's just,
In paragraph 3, the second sentence of paragraph 3,
Yes.
and it says, the first sentence says that you borrowed $60,000 from your share of Clark LLC, presumably for the purchase of property in Argentina. Second sentence, there was no formal loan document since he was, in effect, borrowing from himself.
no, there was a loan document. My dad did. He has a loan document somewhere. He's got a little bit of pre-Alzheimer's, as my mother would attest. Not just a little bit. He's not doing that great, to be honest with you, Bruce.
But you've not produced any documents in this proceeding.
He doesn't give them to me. It's not mine. I don't have them. I can't go to my dad and get them. I went to my dad and I got you those documents. You saw what he gave me. Okay, I made a very good faith effort to go to my dad and get papers. And you need to look at his notarized statement saying this isn't what we set this LLC up for. I don't give this guy cash. He can't get cash from it. He can't sell it. He can't sell it. It's the land we live on in our house.
I'm going to offer one-on-one.
I have no objection, Your Honor.
All right, one moment, resolution.
Now, I was started off by asking you about what your,
So this,
I'm
don't
sorry.
talk about it.
I'll get that. What your assets were at the time of the divorce and what your assets are today. And let me show you what I marked as exhibit 1 of 2.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Moore.
Here's the K1, schedule K1 for 2004.
Correct.
And down in the lower left-hand corner, it talks about, it indicates your beginning and ending capital account in Clark LLC, is that right?
Yes.
And the ending capital account is $293,068.
Right. And again, I clarify, it's not a cash aspect and it can't be sold or bought.
We understand
It's
that's-
an intellectual product. That's the fact.
And I'll offer 102.
Any objection, one, two?
Mr. Hopla, no objection.
No
Excuse
objection.
me. Let me get 2 minutes. All right, so one, two, received.
And then earlier, okay, earlier in these proceedings, there was a K1 that I just received today, so I'm wanting it a lot sooner, for 2012. And as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, it had an ending value of $601,000.
That's correct. Again, it's a non-cash asset. It's not liquidatable. It's an intellectual product. It's
We
an
understand.
arbitrary number. It has no relevance to these proceedings whatsoever.
So let's talk about your employment situation with Wells Fargo. Your job was a mortgage originator.
Correct.
And your observations of irregularities, there was some relationship between your job and those observations.
They were my desk, my job.
But your job did not, you weren't in a management job where it was your job description to determine their compliance with federal regulations.
Under the SAFE Act regulations, we became and the Dodd-Frank regulations, we became and were trained specifically that we were mandatory reporters.
Okay.
We were mandatory reporters in the same sense that they have in daycare centers, where if you observe abuse, you have to continue and endlessly report it without end.
Okay.
You have to continue on, period.
That's your testimony that your obligation is to endlessly report it.
I would have to say that's hyperbole to some extent.
But that is what you did, isn't it? You endlessly.
It's what needed to be
reported.
done under the circumstances, given the gravity of what they did to me.
Is that a yes?
That's an absolute yes, and I stand by it, and I believe it's well documented if people would simply take the time to look at the little bit of simple evidence. It's not that difficult.
Okay. Now, how did you make your observations known in this endless way? You first went
You
to
could first go to your
manager.
manager. He said, "Stop your whining on email." And of course, that pisses you off a little bit. Excuse the French. And then you push back a little bit. You kind of get a little edgy. You go, "Hey, wait a minute here. I'm one of your top producers trying to tell you serious business stuff." Well, then they transfer you to some daffy lady out in the east that has no idea even what you do. Well, then you realize 2 weeks later you're really dealing through the attorneys at that point. You're not dealing with them anymore. You're dealing through these attorneys.
So-
Every email that you send is being routed to the attorneys. You're not really. And I have proof of that. I mean, it's in the file. In the
Isn't it true that Wells Fargo, in effect, tried to keep you in your job?
no.
Wasn't that what they were doing
No.
when they sent you to Human Resources?
No. It's just what a big company does.
Did they offer, like, counseling?
Every big company does that as a knee-jerk
Well, just
reaction.
answer
Yes,
about you here.
yes, every company, every time anybody's in HR,
Well, just answer about you.
and it has no relevance. It's an abuse of the psychiatric resource. That's all it
Did
is.
they offer you counseling?
No, they don't offer. They suggest you call EAP,
And that's it.
Employee Assistance Program, and then you call. You go, wait, this is a scam. All they do is refer you out to some doctor. I don't have any mental problems. Why would I? Did you get that, Mr. Newton? That if you don't have mental problems, you're not obligated to go see mental health. And when you ask, did they offer it, it provides the inference to others. That's exactly what they did with our police in 2011. It's on the police audio. If you
Okay,
can
well,
wrap
that-
around
that
your
would
head
have-
around it, Wells Fargo fired him for acting crazy. They offered him counseling, this, that, the other, and he didn't. Wait a minute, they passed that word to our local police in 2011 to come out to my
That's
house?
different, so, but you didn't avail yourself of any kind of...
Why would I?
Okay. Right. You just said every email. So my question now is, how many emails did you send to your supervisor or others in?
Very few, because after the first 2 weeks, I was told that they were not delivered; they were routed. And so once I was told that they were all routed to this Elise riser, I just had fun because I knew that they weren't going to anybody.
You had fun involving how many?
Oh, I don't know, maybe 100.
Maybe
Over
100?
Yeah, over a 3-month period. All factual. All saying you can't do this. No, this is wrong. You abuse this system this way. Ms. Riser, this is Lady back east. You have no idea what my job function is.
Didn't
You're doing the wrong
complain
thing.
about their operations in Hyderabad in India or something?
On the system that we worked on called CORE, an origination system and an imaging system called ELF, were being developed out of Bangalore. The imaging system went down for 6 weeks. Okay, finally, out of the whole nation of America, my processor, Susan Overton, because I told her, this is where it's being developed. I was the persona non grata. She put out a couple calls, and sure enough, they brought it back up. It was because I had to work on a broken system they were converting. I've got a lot of experience with system conversions. That was a system conversion out of the 1960s. It was god-awful. And you understand, and so that gave me standing to later report that. I did not report that until the very end. In fact, that may have even been after employment.
When you say in your declaration that litigation is totally completely occupied all your available time, actually a lot of your available time was spending 100 emails, was it not?
That is part of litigation, is communication. I know in your world, motions to compel that I pay for and things like that, but in the real world, you try to communicate with people first.
Those emails were they introduced as evidence in the Wells Fargo as plaintiff case?
Oh, all their cases, what they do is they dump everybody's emotions into the court that have nothing to do with the aspects in front of the court. It's what civil attorneys do for corporations, of course.
I want to ask you this about your declaration as well. Your declaration was in June 5th, 2013, and the last sentence of paragraph 8 you say, referring to the Wells Fargo as plaintiff litigation, the litigation is ongoing.
It's ongoing.
Okay, that particular litigation was already over, was it not?
You're making a picky distinction, Mr. Newton.
And how is that?
How's it ongoing? Because I was threatening in all my faxes that I was going to be suing them. That was what the whole thing was. That's why they persecuted me and tortured me. As I said, I'm turning you guys more into the FBI with more specifics, and I'm going to file a lawsuit against you. Okay, so then they take their next steps.
It's very clear from your declaration that sentence refers to the litigation where Wells Fargo was
No,
plaintiff.
no, you're reading that into that. I'm sorry. I had long planned and was already working on my lawsuit that was filed September 3rd.
So in your mind, you were...
Oh, in my mind, I hired an attorney named Barry Davis. I paid him a bunch of money. He stole the money from me. He took it a year. Well, he took my money. Did nothing for me whatsoever. Nothing. Didn't even give me a cost bill.
Right.
Okay, I tried.
Wait for Mr. Nunez.
Yeah.
What is your reasonable expectation in terms of the outcome of the current litigation you have filed?
Because my facts are 100% correct, and once people sit down,
No, I'm talking about
I will
what you
win.
anticipate in
I will.
terms of money.
I don't look at money. Juries and judges. I put in a notice of claim on Lane County in the city for $4 million. Okay, I'm going to file that lawsuit soon.
So you have more lawsuits.
Oh, it's going to go on. I'm right. They're wrong. It's
Forever,
proven.
doesn't it?
It doesn't matter. It has to.
Doesn't matter to you.
It doesn't. There's things that are a little bit more important than me, you, her, and that's our nation, our system. You don't send police out to people's house and tell them to not communicate. You don't haul people off to jail 2 times in a 2-year period for saying the right thing in a way that might offend them, but it's a rightful, righteous way. In a humorous way, okay, a funny, hilarious way, and then they turn it around. They use those same faxes in every court.
Mr. Clark, so...
To bury the facts.
I want to
To
get
bury the facts is what they do with faxes. They bury the real facts. FACTSs are buried with faxes. That's what they did.
I want to ask you this. Isn't what you're doing is saying that I'm going to endlessly litigate...
Until I win.
Well, please let me ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
And while I litigate, I can't work.
No, not necessarily. That's why I applied for the licensure.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about that. I'm a little bit unclear about whether you're saying you can't work because of your reputation being destroyed or because of your license. Which is it?
It's all of it.
It's everything.
And the emotional. You got to understand, Mr. Newton, I need you to back up just a little bit and try to be a human being here and try to comprehend if every month or two you were getting stuff in the mail from some attorney, some court, some process, having garnishments, $5,500 a month being bled out. It's emotionally destabilizing, okay? And each one of them a human being can easily deal with. You say, well, why don't you go see a therapist? Well, a therapist isn't going to do anything about the underlying situation. I have to deal with that. Did you understand that when a human being is battered this badly over time, you can't get up in the morning to it gets down to being, Mr. Newton, if I came and told you my history, would you hire me to do a loan for you? Well, company, they Google you, they check you out. So I think it's a little bit wrongful and speculative, to be honest with you.
So you're saying that the stress of having
All
that
these things. All of
spousal
them.
support obligation is too destabilizing you just can't do it.
It all adds up. It's all additive.
Is that yes or no?
It depends on how you mean it and how you're asking it, but the answer is that there is a set of circumstances in my life that for the last 2 years have prevented me from being gainfully employed. Part of that time it was for very good legal reasons, being in the courts themselves. Once I saw an end in sight to the court, okay, and saw that, yes, if I can get through the civil matter with Wells Fargo, I can maybe get my license back. Okay, but does that mean I can earn money? Does that mean I can find the first client? It's a commission job.
Well, how long do you think that this
I don't
litigation
know.
you just filed will last?
Well, maybe if people would help out a little bit, Mr. Newton, it would go a lot quicker. Maybe if people like yourself who have an interest in it and who have knowledge helped out, it would. Maybe if you would approach my attorney and saying, maybe we have an interest in this case.
Okay.
You know, those are the things that this community could do to help
And
me
that,
out.
that kind of gets to the bottom line here I'm talking about. You've said before, have you not, that if we kind of all get on board, that we could probably get more money in damages from them than you could
Not
ever earn
more,
working.
not more money in damages. Again, money's a funny construct. On one hand, you have to, in certain constructs, put a number on it. When I put in a notice of claim in Lane County, I had to put, the way I interpreted it, because I'm pro se, I had to put a number on it. In my federal case, I didn't put a number on it. I said it's determined by a jury. Did you see? Because I knew that in the federal case I could do that.
Okay.
I didn't perceive that on a notice of complaint in Oregon I could do that. I thought I had to list them more specific. I'm sorry.
Okay, I served you with what was called respondent's request for admissions, correct?
What's that?
A respondent's request for admissions, where I ask you to answer yes or no to a series of questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
We doing okay, Mr. Hopla?
Are we doing okay?
Am I doing okay?
If I was a judge, I would have cut you off a number of times, but I trust our judge's discretion. Thank you.
So if I need to be shut up, just tell me to shut up, please.
The attorneys can control.
Yeah, but sometimes I'll tend to, if you're just looking for a number or a fact.
Okay. The first request for admission here was that I have a physical or mental condition that prevents me from obtaining employment. You answered no, right? Is that correct?
At that time. It's the way I interpret a question at that time.
Is it a different answer now?
I think I've done a good job describing it to you in the last 10 minutes.
Has something changed between when you answered these questions and right now?
It's the way when you read a question. Remember, I don't sit and study a question and I quickly go through it in 2 minutes and check them off the blocks. Okay, I may not have read the question correctly. I may have interpreted it in a different light that day.
I understand.
That's why I tried to elaborate to you in this court, because that form, that checkbox doesn't have room for the facts.
Okay.
So if I put no there, the answer is wrong. Okay, I put a wrong answer on your form, as I
So
described
you
to you.
do have a physical or mental condition that prevents you from obtaining employment? If you do, tell us what it is.
See, this is what it is, a physical condition. Well, gosh, when you're in civil process, that's a physical condition of you. When you're in criminal process, that's a physical condition. Okay, when you're in civil or physical processes, those are physical conditions. You may interpret them as medical conditions.
Let me ask you
I have no medical
straightforward
conditions.
question. And I believe that you've already testified this.
Mental conditions, I'm mentally battered.
Okay.
Okay, I've got
Wait,
traumatic
wait.
stress disorder, or whatever you want to call it.
You have not submitted any application for employment since you were terminated.
Well, I've offered my employment to
Is that
people like
yes or
Oakville
no?
Tree Deacons. I haven't formally applied. I've informally applied for jobs.
To who?
Well, I figured Oakville Tree Deacons or Wells Fargo would like to hire me, but they haven't responded yet. I offered them my services.
Ogletree Deacons being the law firm that
That's right.
represents Wells Fargo.
Yeah, or Wells Fargo.
That's a defendant in your federal
that's
lawsuit.
correct.
So that's who you informally applied to.
Why not? Why not? They took my job away. Why wouldn't I ask for it back? Is it facetious? Yeah, maybe.
Wait, about your mortgage licensure.
Yes.
Now, my understanding is to some extent the license actually is like through the employer in a sense.
No, if it's a federally insured institution, it is.
Okay.
If it's and it's called a registration, and you get a number, but you carry the same number over to being licensed. It identifies you as an individual.
What I need to know is what if you received any kind of letter, correspondence, document, or whatever that told you that your license was suspended or not effective
No, the registration ends by law, which is in the SAFE Act law.
on termination.
On termination, your registration ends. Now, if you work for a mortgage broker and you're licensed, okay, your job can end, and your license does not end. You have your license until the end of that calendar year.
What will be required for you to have an active license?
What would be required? Everything is in place right now. I've submitted it all to the NMS. It's extensive what you have to give them. You have to give them a bunch of money. You have to give them your fingerprints. You have to give them all this information, endless information about where you've lived forever. You have to give them the past test scores. You have to give them proof of 20 hours of education. You have to go to this class for 20 hours beforehand. All that goes into the system, and the only thing holding it up right now is a decision as to how to deal with the slap suit that Wells Fargo filed against me, and it was a slap suit.
But that's over, right?
It's over, but Google me, dude. Google me. That's what people do these days. Hey, am I going to do something with Andy? I'm going to Google him. Google me, please. Andrew Clark, Eugene Oregon. Do it, please. That's what real people do these days. That's the real world.
Wait for a question.
Sorry.
So you've now filed your Uniform Support Declaration Schedule 1, and you indicate you have your fixed expenses are about $1,770.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, okay. And then Ms. Strigo and her son, they don't pay any rent or anything.
Correct.
Okay, so in essence, you're helping them out.
And they pay the utilities and whatnot, which would be about the amount of rent. Gas, electric, trash, and what was the other one? Water.
Now, during this time, for the last 2.5 years, so you testified that you had no income, and then you did, just recently, you did cash in, an investment thing, an IRA or something.
A 401k.
401k. But you were consistently borrowing money from, I guess you'd say, either your parents or the LLC, correct?
Not consistently. It was as needed. Whenever you guys would come after me for more money, I
Weren't
would
you
get it.
pretty consistently getting $3,000?
That was only for a 1-year period.
For one of the years.
Right, just the last 1 year period.
Okay, you just got $3,000.
Up from roughly September of 12 to August of 13,
On-
and then I had to pay it all back.
On the banking statement that you provided, it says just over and over and over again, Carol Clark, from Clark LLC, just over and over and over again. What were those for? Were those monies that you borrowed?
Well, if you notice, there's a lot of items on that. That's a checking account register. And the first thing I'd like to point out to you that it has all of his activity on there, not just to me. So you have to sort of weed out the fact that there's items to my sister Lynn in there, to his timber guy in there.
That's Mr. Clark's.
That's
checking.
right. That's his checking ledger. See, so it's got a lot of other activity on
Mr.
there.
Clark, your father.
Yes.
Okay.
And let me kind of skip the subject a little bit. The inheritance. First of all, let me go back. You inherited money from another aunt back in, 2000?
Technically, no. Technically, no, but
Well, let
yes.
me help you.
I know that's weird. I got $80,000.
$80,000.
Yeah, but it wasn't actually inherited by me. It was only inherited in the name of two of my sisters.
Right.
And then they ended up splitting it
They
out.
perceived that was kind of a mistake. And they,
Whatever, yeah, and I had to pay all these taxes on the money. It was insane the amount of taxes I had to pay on that thing, like 20
That
grand
inheritance,
taxes.
my understanding is that you inherited $80,000. You had to pay about $20,000 of that in taxes, and then your dad gave you $70,000.
60.
Well,
Lent me.
$70,000 because you owed Miss Clark $10,000.
Yeah, or
That
something.
went down to $120, and with that $120,000, you bought the Argentine.
Right, those two pieces of after marriage, after dissolution money.
Okay. All right.
They
So
were
you-
clearly and separately from anything that she had anything to do
you
with.
buy that asset.
That's correct. Investment.
Right. And now you just recently in September of 2013 you inherited about $550,000.
That's correct.
And about $20,000 was withheld for taxes.
Correct.
And you used $107,000 to pay back Clark LLC.
Correct.
for
My
those
parents.
loans.
My parents. I'm paying back my parents who used Clark LLC as a vehicle for personal lending.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It's a difference.
Sort of. So the difference there is, I don't know, what it is, $423,000 or something like
Right.
that. Where's that?
Oh,
Where's the $423,000?
well, first thing I had to do was start cutting checks to her for like 24 grand.
Well, where did you put it? I mean, where did
Oh, it's all just sitting right in the statement. I haven't moved it out of that account.
Savings.
Yeah, if we got more of the statements, we'd see how well I had to pay out this attorney, that attorney. You just see more of the same attorney bills. And you'd see that, I haven't taken any unreasonable or undue amounts of money and put it anywhere.
And in fact, you borrowed, money from your dad over that 5-year period, and he gave you additional money that there weren't even.
Those are the distributions.
Let me finish the question. You may know what he's talking about, but
Yeah.
I'm not quite
Oh,
sure.
I understand. Thank
So
you.
go ahead and finish your question.
Okay. I'm just saying that your dad gave you additional amounts of money that weren't loans that he didn't require you to pay, to sign any promise or anything.
Those are perhaps the distributions.
That and there may have been other things as
Yeah.
well.
So there's everything is mixed in there. You see, they do their distributions of the LLC that we did talk about, the $2,000 a year if they take timber, do this commercial thinning.
Back in, you took a deposition in September 8th, 2006. So this would have been one of the proceedings right after legal separation,
Right,
as
right.
it was being converted to a dissolution.
Sure.
Right. And at that time, you made a statement, and I'm going to let you, just give your version of this, if you will, where you said that your dad stopped contributing shares of the corporation to you several years ago. But actually, he continued to give you those shares consistently over a 15-year period, did he not?
Again, I had no real knowledge, and I've tried to keep telling you this every day to this day. I operate off belief when it comes to his LLC because they don't share any details with us. It's theirs. All it is a way to avoid taxation. I think even under the new inheritance laws that were passed a few years ago, they wouldn't have even set up this LLC. It would have been unnecessary potentially. And so all it is a paper assignment of the value of their estate when they die. That's all it is a paper value. And I can't control it. My dad might have said you can, but clearly he's demonstrated that I can't. So he might have wrote a little note that I could, but he demonstrated that I don't. I don't have any of the checking accounts. I don't have access to it.
I think you stated before that it would be, the limitation is your 3 siblings would have to agree.
Again, I was told, you operate off family lore with this stuff, Mr. Newton, but there's theory and there's reality, and the reality is I have no way to touch the money. I have no knowledge of it, really. And if I told you that in 2006, that would have been my honest belief at that time. Since then, I've received other information that changes that, and I honestly, tell you. But I don't want it to be construed that I lied then or now. It's just you get different impressions of what it is. It's because if I truly had control of it, I would know what it is.
Well, not to belabor the point, but you did have access to $107,000.
Of their personal money that they put into the account. If you look at that ledger, you'll see how they fund the account with their own personal money. Do you understand the difference? It's a personal loan under the veil of a corporate structure in order to gain equity in case of their demise. such that my sisters don't come to me and say, well, Andy, you borrowed all this money and you're still getting 1/4 share even. So they put that device where they take their personal cash, not the cash of the LLC, it has done. So they take their money, they get significant annuity money. My mom was a teacher.
Right, so I got that.
So actually, your mom and dad's estate is larger than Clark LLC.
I presume so, but I don't know and I don't speculate because that's just not what I do. I just read.
And does this knowledge that you have now about owning 25% of Clark LLC contradict your statement earlier that my mother can undo this whole thing?
She says that. I don't know if she can or not.
Okay, fair enough.
If Amy, yeah. Okay.